Hello, dreamers, and welcome to episode 251. I have a few notes about the show before we start. This is an independent one-woman podcast, which means I rely on you to help us continue to grow bigger and better, and there are a couple of ways that you can help. You can leave a nice rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to your shows on. I do get new reviews each week. Not always good ones, but reviews nonetheless. So thank you to all of you who leave nice ones. And if you left a mean one, why are you even listening to this? You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm pretty active on there, and we can discuss all the good, the bad, and the ugly stuff that we talk about each week. And if you would feel so inclined, you may consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. For as little as $1 a month, you will gain access to a whole bunch of full-length episodes that you won't hear anywhere else. February's bonus is available in case you didn't get the memo, and it's a sad one. Lots of shattered dreams and 2 families destroyed because of unmanageable lives and out-of-control behavior. But if a subscription isn't your thing and you would still like to help out, you can make a one-time donation through PayPal using my email, californiapod@gmail.com. This week, I would like to thank Lynn N., Natasha, Tina E., Lynette N., Ank K., Mary R., Johnny A., Melinda W., Jocelyn H., Kate S., Linda M., BC, Diane, Thomas O., and Beth C. for either joining Patreon, going annual, or raising your pledge. I did send out some thank you cards and gifts about 2 weeks ago, and I'll be getting to those who joined Patreon in November, December, and January very soon. All right, let's get this show on the road. So this is a pretty interesting story that someone recently told me about, and it's a relatively new documentary on Netflix called The Hatchet-Wielding Hitchhiker. His name is Caleb McGillivary, and in February of 2013, he rose to internet fame known as Kai when he was giving an interview to a local news station in the city of Fresno, California. And there really is no other way to describe this video other than just playing it for you. You may have already seen it, or you may have seen the documentary. If that's the case, you can go ahead and fast forward for about 6 minutes. So, here he is. Kai, the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker guy.
I'm one of the heroes.
Yeah. Can we talk to you? Do you mind?
What do you want to talk about?
What happened today?
Well, went straight out of Dogtown, skateboarding, surfing it up. Before I say anything else, I want to say no matter what you've done, you deserve respect. Even if you make mistakes, you're lovable. And it doesn't matter your look, skills, or age, or size, or anything, you're worthwhile. No one could ever take that away from you. Now, this stuff right here, I was driving and I was in the passenger side of this f***er's car, and he comes over on there. He was over by the recycling center. He says, "Oh, when I was in the Virgin Islands, 30 years old on a business trip, I this 14-year-old. I was like, "You what?" He's like, "I raped this 14-year-old." Starts crying, gives me a big hug. He's like 300-pound guy. I'm like, "Oh shit, he must be man, like, what's he talking about?" I didn't take him seriously at first. Comes driving down this way. He's like, "You know what? I come to realize I'm Jesus Christ and I can do anything I want to." And watch this, bam, and he smashed into this guy right there, pinned him in between that truck. And so I hop out. I look over, the guy's pinned there. I mean, like, freight train riders know this. Like, if you get pinned between something, do not move that shit, otherwise you bleed out. Like, I ran in, I grabbed the keys, he's sitting there like nothing even happened. And like, man, if he started driving that car around again, man, there would have been a hell of a lot of bodies around here. I hop on out, and so I grabbed the bag, I threw it over by that pole right there, and then Buddy gets out, and these 2 women are trying to help him. He runs up and he grabs one of them, man. Like, a guy that big can snap a woman's neck like a pencil stick. So I ran up behind him with a hatchet, smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
The lady said you saved her life.
She was the one who got grabbed by that f***er. You know what? F*** is cool. That guy ain't. Shit.
How'd you get in his car? How did you?
I was hitchhiking. Well, good thing I was hitchhiking. Yeah, people say don't hitchhike. Well, this is what happens. Yeah, well, at least I was here.
So he did this on purpose?
Dude, that guy was fucking cooked out, man. Like, he's beyond howley. Like, I don't even see any breath in him, you know what I'm saying?
Can I get your name and where you're from, if you don't mind?
I'm Kai.
Kai? Can I get spelling for you, buddy?
Straight out of Dogtown, K-A-I.
K-A-I. Do you have a last name?
No, bro, I don't have anything.
Where are you from originally? Are you from Fresno area?
Sophia, West Virginia.
No kidding. How old are you?
I can't call it.
Okay. What have you ever experienced anything like today, and what made you take the actions that you did?
That woman was in danger. He just finished what looked like at the time killing somebody, and if I hadn't have done that, he would have killed more people. So he's dead. Good.
Did you ever experience anything like that, Kai?
Well, this one time I was in an orchard and this fucking guy starts beating on this woman who he calls his. So I walked on over and I started smashing him in the head. You see all these teeth marks right here for the camera? Yeah, I started smashing him in the head and in the teeth, busted out all his teeth. The sheriffs, not the policy enforcers, show up and start like they're like, yeah, so what happened? I mean, like, just give me any old name and just give me old birthday, whatever. Just yeah.
What happened today after you're obviously free now, but were you arrested? What was the process? What did they do to you when they came out? Obviously they found out that you did the right thing, but the time that from the accident until now, where have you been?
Well, you started following like I cleaned his motherfucking head wide open with a hatchet. He stood up like he was pulled right up, right? And like I'm like, bro, if you're Jesus Christ, I'll be the Antichrist, man. Like that. And he starts following me off this way, so I figure I'll lure him away from the crowd. So I'm running off this way. I got a hatchet in one hand, this bag I'm carrying over with another hand. I start running off that way, and so a couple of the people who was bystanders to it came over and told me to stop. And I was like, why stop? And he was like, the cops are already on their way. I was like, is he back up and doing anything? And somebody said that he was like masturbating in front of this school or whatever this place is right here. Yeah.
Were you questioned by police? Were you taken into custody? What happened? I mean, obviously.
I was questioned. I was put into the back of the sheriff's wagon. Wasn't the policies that pulled I over? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like, I got put in the back of the sheriff's wagon. The sheriff was like, "What happened here?" Took down a statement. I told him everything I just told you, and let me on out. Said I couldn't grab all this stuff until I had finished like. They had finished with something, you know what I mean? And like brought me back on over here so I could be in front of this thing, like this car right here. It's gnarly, man. Holy shit. That's like the biggest wave I've ever ridden in my life.
What's next for you, Kai?
Hopefully some surfing. If anybody's watching this somewhere else and they got a mini Mal that they could lend a guy with a wetsuit, I'd love to test out Mavericks.
Would you do it again?
Club him in the head with a hatchet? You know, if I could go back in time, I'd go back over to where I was at that recycling center and he said that he had raped that chick over in the Virgin Islands, because it doesn't matter where you at. You can just spend a bunch of money and do whatever the you want, you know, that's not right. If I could go back in time, I would have dabbed him up right there.
No, you're not. I mean, it doesn't seem like you have any concern for yourself. You're all about, I mean, doing the right thing and not even worrying about Kai first.
I don't have any family. Like, as far as anybody I grew up with is concerned, I'm already dead, so whatever. It's all good.
So you can probably tell that this guy has the vernacular of, say, your quintessential California surfer guy. But that's not exactly what we have here. I think you have to take most of what this guy has to say about himself with a grain of salt. He's claimed, among other things, to be from West Virginia. He's a musician. And when it comes to West Virginia and surfing, I looked it up, and in fact, there is landlocked river surfing in West Virginia. And the truth is, this guy's name isn't Kai, it's Caleb. And he's not from West Virginia. He's from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I looked that up too. You can do some landlocked hanging 10 in the province of Alberta as well. Caleb has also claimed that he didn't have any family, and pretty much as far as anyone was concerned, he was dead. And he apparently didn't have any official forms of identification, no driver's license, no social security number, or as they call it in Canada, a social insurance number. I think that's right. But anyway, his government name is Caleb McGillivary. And when I first started this, I thought, well, maybe I'll refer to him by his last name, but it's kind of annoying to say it over and over again, so we're just going to call him Caleb. And beginning in 2013, the world came to know him as Kai, the surfer guy. This homeless, or home free as he liked to call it, hitchhiking hero who had a pretty wild story to tell the news reporter in Fresno on that particular February day. I'm not going to be calling him Kai. It's a fake name and I don't like it. I'm just going to be calling him Caleb. So in that video that I played for you that propelled Caleb into internet viral fame, he said that he was hitchhiking and he described having accepted a ride from a passerby driving a black sedan, and the gentleman's name was Jett McBride. And as they drove, and McBride is a very large man who was a complete stranger to Caleb, told him that he was a second coming of Christ. And then McBride went on to admit that during a business trip that he was on for work in the British Virgin Islands, that he sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. Caleb also claimed that this man was talking about how all black people should be dead. However, he was using some racial slurs. And this happened right before McBride struck a black man with his vehicle. And the man that McBride hit with his sedan, his name was Rayshawn Neely. He was an employee with Pacific Gas and Electric. He was part of a team with 3 other PG&E employees who were working on a project that day when out of nowhere, Rayshawn was struck by McBride's vehicle, which came barreling right into the area where they were set up working. One of the other workers tried in vain to wave at the oncoming vehicle to get him to stop, but McBride kept going, running into Rayshawn, pinning him between his sedan and their work truck, effectively trapping him between the 2 vehicles. Rayshawn yelled out for help as he was hit, but then became pinned, but shortly thereafter, he lost consciousness for a few moments. After having seen what happened to Rayshawn, his co-workers, along with some other nearby witnesses, hurried over to try to help him and render aid. But in doing so, they were met with this very large Jett McBride. He was described as being over 6 feet tall and about 300 pounds, or somewhere around 1.93 meters tall and 136 kilograms. McBride had exited his vehicle, and it appeared as though he was going to attempt to continue to inflict further injury to an already injured Rayshawn Neely. McBride grabbed him and was attempting to pull on him in what appeared to get him out from being pinned between the 2 vehicles in order to try to harm him in some other ways, while at the same time shouting out, "I'm Jesus Christ, and I've been sent to take all black people, including Rayshawn, to heaven." Rayshawn by then had come to, and despite his injuries, was desperately trying to get himself unwedged from between the 2 cars, while at the same time McBride was pulling on him, asking him over and over again if he believed in Jesus Christ. So a witness named Tanya Baker had been standing across the street with her daughter Ginger when this accident happened. Tanya is a registered nurse, so she right away went over to the scene to try and help Rayshawn. And in doing so, she also at the same time was attempting to stop McBride from further injuring Rayshawn, telling McBride to get back into his own car. However, this only caused him to turn his attention towards her, and then he grabbed Tanya and placed her in what has been described as a bear hug, and with all of his strength began squeezing her as hard as he could. As Tanya struggled to free herself from McBride's grip, she was no match for his size and strength. He absolutely would not let go and even began to strike her about the head and on her back, and I even heard a report where he was trying to also kiss her. So when McBride was grappling Tanya in that bear hug and striking her and doing all this is when Caleb stepped in. He had been a passenger in the sedan at the time that McBride struck Rayshawn. He was trying to get McBride to release his hold on Tanya by punching him a few times, But if you've seen Caleb's video, you can see that he's kind of a thin guy. So him swinging on McBride pretty much had no effect on this very large and clearly very angry man who seemed to be in the throes of some kind of an episode. So Caleb returned to the vehicle where his backpack was at, and it looked like he had stuff with him where one would be camping or living outdoors. He had a lot of things on his backpack, and one of the items he had with him was a hatchet. Caleb grabbed his hatchet and struck McBride in the back of the head 2 times with the blunt end of the hatchet, and the 3rd time with the bladed end. Because apparently the first 2 strikes didn't get McBride to let go of Tanya, so Caleb turned the hatchet around and used that bladed side. And that was the blow that finally got McBride to let Tanya out of that bear hug, at which point other bystanders who had gathered around to help Rayshawn then turned their attention onto McBride, and together they were able to overpower him and hold him down while waiting for the police to arrive. McBride, still being combative and belligerent, continued to threaten those who were holding him down in place, and soon law enforcement arrived at the scene and took him into custody. The media began to show up at the scene of the accident. Over their scanners, they heard that there was this pretty serious vehicle crash involving a utility worker, and one of them was trapped and pinned by these vehicles, and one of the drivers at the scene was going crazy. So the media rushed out there to report the news, as they do, and as soon as they became aware of this guy, Caleb, who was telling everybody that his name was Kai, it was turning out that he's this unexpected, unlikely, hitchhiking homeless hero who saved the day with this hatchet. He gave that interview that you heard at the beginning of this episode to a news affiliate in Fresno. And with that, Caleb McGillivary became viral famous. Everyone wanted to interview this guy, who at the time was only 24 years old. And he was really being hailed as a hero, and there's no taking away from that. He saved some lives that day. And so what was happening in the wake of all of this is that suddenly Caleb was presented with this chance to potentially turn his life around, perhaps get off the streets, and to begin to make something out of his life, because he was so likable and endearing. And Caleb McGillivary would certainly go on to experience some major changes in his life. However, they would not be in the ways that everyone thought he would back when he charmed his way into your YouTube suggested videos. And it didn't really seem like Caleb was even really going to be sticking around at the scene for very much longer, the scene of this accident, I mean, as it appeared as though he was headed off to wherever the roads were going to take him next, right? But there was this reporter, and his name is Jett McBride. He was actually the sports reporter for his news station, and on that particular day, they found themselves to be short-staffed on regular reporters, so they sent him out when they got word over their police scanners that there was this accident. And so this car accident and the subsequent interview that he had with the hitchhiking hatchet hero, that was Jessup's news reporting debut, like his regular news versus his sports news reporting. So when Jessup heard about this homeless hero that saved Tanya and Rayshawn by striking their attacker with this hatchet, Jessup began looking around to see if he could find this guy, because he wasn't sure where he was at and who it was. But soon he spotted this guy that kind of looked like he had no place to go and was carrying what appeared to be all of his worldly belongings on his back. And so Jessup thought, that might be him, right? Genius. So he hurried over and he stopped him and asked him if he could ask him about what happened. And that's when Caleb became the Hatchet-Wielding Hitchhiker. And while on camera, the first thing that Caleb came up with was this really inspiring monologue about being a worthy person, no matter what you do or what happens to you in life. And that was the kind of thing that tugged at the heartstrings, right? Here's this guy who seems to be kind of down on his luck, and he's being hailed as the hero of the day. And the first thing he does is to use this moment to give this inspirational message. And all of that would be before he would go on to tell us how he smashed, suh-maaaashed the big guy in the head with his hatchet. Jessup did point out that it was kind of shocking, not so much that Caleb was carrying a hatchet with him. After all, the outdoors was his home, but it was the fact that Caleb was so willing to hit someone in the head with it. And to an extent, I agree, because afterwards, in the viral interview, it didn't really seem like Caleb was all that bothered or affected by the fact that he had literally just axed another human being in the head. That isn't something that happens to a person very often. And even the times when we have talked about criminals, not heroes, using a hatchet or an axe as their weapon of choice. And it's kind of disturbing, the idea of hacking somebody to death with such a sharp, heavy, destructive bladed instrument. And I mean, we've had a couple of cases where someone used a weapon like this or similar to this to dispatch their victims. And the nature of it isn't lost on many of us, at least I would hope it's not. It apparently was back in 2013. It's the violence of it all and the up close and personal way about it. But this guy, Caleb, right from the start, I'm bothered by how unbothered he was about it. And it's disturbing. However, Caleb did land the first 2 strikes using the blunt end of the hatchet, and when that did not seem to have any effect on the attacker, he turned it around and struck McBride with the bladed side. I don't know if Caleb used the blunt end purposely at first because he didn't want to send that blade slicing into this guy's skull, or if he just started off with the blunt end because he was in a panicked moment and didn't realize the hatchet was turned the other way around. Whatever the case may have been, he still struck this man in the head with the blade of a hatchet. Let's not forget that as we move along in the story here. But in the end, everybody survived and everyone recovered from the injuries that they sustained that day, including Rayshawn Neely and Jett McBride. And interestingly enough, as talkative and excitable and lively as Caleb was in that interview that he gave to Jessup, once he was done and other reporters approached him, he turned all other requests for interviews down, and he was content to just go along his merry way, off to destination whatever's next. And that effectively left Jessup Riesback with the world exclusive. Here's the thing. The Adventures of Caleb, the hitchhiking hatchet hero, it checked all the boxes of what makes a viral sensation. They had this big, bad, evil guy, Jett McBride, and I mean, you can't make these names up, right? You had this accidental hero who saved the day, who also happens to be passing through Fresno, bumming rides as he goes along. You have victims in distress being targeted by this racist madman. And then, as it turned out, the news that afternoon and evening only aired a portion of what Jessup and his cameraman had captured of Caleb's profanity-laden soliloquy. So when Jessup went home that night, he decided to upload the entire segment onto YouTube in case anyone wanted to see the whole thing, because deep down, he knew what he was doing. As soon as he finished talking to Caleb, Jessup was fairly certain that he had something viral worthy on his hands, and he did. The cameraman who filmed the interview, he did the same thing when he went home. He uploaded the video. And by the next day, Caleb's video was racking up views by the hundreds of thousands. And within days, the whole internet was talking about the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker. Caleb became every person's hero. Now, to be honest, I vaguely remember hearing about this video at the time, and I thought back to February of 2013. Where the heck was I? Living on a rock or something? And I basically was. I wasn't working at the time, but it didn't take me long to remember, oh yeah, I was glued to the Jodi Arias murder trial. That's what I was doing. HLN was all over that case, and so was I. And the rest of the world was all over Caleb, apparently. So, of course, the natural progression of things is for everybody to begin to want to capitalize off of this. The late-night talk show host began discussing and making jokes about hitchhikers with hatchets. And then there's a segment that Caleb and Jessup did as guests on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And I'm going to play it for you now because I just want you to hear it. I think it's important for you to hear it ahead of our discussion. And I'll post the link in the show notes in case you want to see it on YouTube. We're going to talk a lot about this. So let's listen to it first and then we'll discuss.
There's a fantastic YouTube clip. It already has millions of views. It's the story of an unlikely hero named Kai. In case you aren't familiar with Kai, here's a taste courtesy of KMPH, the local Fox affiliate in Fresno.
A man claiming he's Jesus plows his car into a PG&E worker, pinning him against his truck because the worker was black. The man's passenger, who had a hatchet, and innocent bystanders come to the rescue.
Comes driving down this way. He's like, you know what? I come to realize I'm Jesus Christ and I can do anything I want to. And watch this. Bam! And he smashed into the guy right there. Pinned him in between that truck.
Homeless hitchhiker Kai was in the passenger seat of the Oldsmobile when this all went down.
And these two women are trying to help him. He runs up and he grabs one of them, man. Like a guy that big can snap a woman's neck like a pencil stick. So right up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
You know, you should never pick up hitchhikers except for that one. The reporter who found Kai, a guy named Jett McBride, wisely posted the entirety of the interview online, and that also became a viral sensation.
Can I get your name and where you're from, if you don't mind?
I'm Kai.
Kai, can I get spelling for it?
Straight out of Dogtown, K-A-I.
K-A-I, do you have a last name?
No, bro, I don't have anything.
Where are you from originally? Are you from Fresno area?
Sophia, West Virginia.
No kidding. How old are you?
I can't call it.
Tonight, we're joined by the reporter who conducted this incredible interview, Jett McBride. Hello, Jett. Now, you are usually the sports reporter for the station, right?
Yeah, eight years of sports anchoring and reporter. I've been on a news beat for a couple days a week because we're short a couple people, and look what happens, man.
And why were you out there? Just because you were shorthanded, you had to go out and do this?
Yeah, they trusted me to get the story, and I did my best.
What was going through your head when you were interviewing Kai?
To keep him talking, for one, because he was spitting out pure gold, as you can tell.
Right.
And the other was to, get the story, because it was a crazy scene out there. So I wanted to keep him talking, but as well as gather the facts and also stay unharmed, really, because you didn't know what was. Seriously, you didn't know what was going on in his head at that time.
Just explain to you that he hit a guy with a hatchet 3 times.
Exactly.
And at this point, do you just retire from journalism? I mean, really, there's nowhere to go from here, is there?
Is that an offer? Is that an offer? No. I love what I do, and I hope to keep doing it.
Well, you were kind enough to, you guys wrangled Kai, and when we come back from commercial, the hatchet man himself, Kai, will be here. So stick around. Plus, we got Mindy Kaling, Carl Reiner, and music from Family of the Year. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll be right back. Mindy Kaling, Carl Reiner, and music from Family of the Year are on the way. I'm in my car right now. Before we get to that, I'm about to pick up a very special hitchhiker. Ladies and gentlemen, please say hi to Kai. Kai, jump in the car. Not on the car, in the car. I don't know if the car can hold your weight, Kai. All right, there we go.
Oh, keep your eye on the road, man. Keep your eye on the road. Holy
well, welcome, Kai. Welcome. How are you?
Excellent. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you. You know, a lot of people are calling you a hero because you thwarted that crazy guy, right?
Well, there's not so much difference between him and who they sell as Jesus anyways, is there?
Well, I don't know. I haven't met him. Did he have a beard?
No. No, he's a fat, rich white guy.
Now, you obviously millions of people have seen this video on the
fat, rich people. No, fat, white people. Yeah.
Yes, you're sitting next to one. You've become very famous now from YouTube, haven't you? I mean, people are recognizing you.
Yep.
What do people say to you when they see you?
They say, "Hey, you're Kai. You're that dude with the hatchet." I'm like, "Not anymore. Took it from me. I was trying to build this really cool ass treehouse with willow hoops, and like I was gonna make a dream catcher out of it, and put wood planks on the floor,
right?
And then have another little hoop above with the chains dangling down beneath that one, tied up to a tree so I could drape tarps across that,
right?
And then on the inside, have like some bed sheets with some moss in there for insulation. You can put like a crab trap there on the inside of a hot water tank heater.
Right.
Yeah. You can burn some wood in there. That would be really awesome to go surfing like
And
that.
you were going to do all that with a hatchet? What, is this some magic hatchet that you have that you wave and things, contractors appear?
No, I'm just a badass.
Hi. You don't like to use the word, they describe you in the video as homeless hitchhiker, but you don't like to use the word homeless.
Home free.
Home
It's
free.
the land of the free and the home of the brave.
You don't want to have a home, correct?
What the hell are you talking about? I am home.
Yeah, I see. So anywhere you are is your home. That's your philosophy?
Yeah.
Now today, this afternoon...
Not mine, though. You know, like just...
This afternoon, I gave you some money just for the hell of it, and what did you do with that money?
The hell of it.
I'll tell you what he did. He gave the money away immediately to someone on the street.
Yeah, I mean, the quickest way to devalue a currency is stop believing in it.
Well, I think you did it just to be nice. Isn't that true? I mean, to help people? You gave away your backpack that had all your belongings in it.
Well, no, I feel belonging with people, and, you know, like, the trees are more people and they're still alive.
Is it true that you will sometimes go into stores and take things and then give the things to poor people?
I jack hella from Walmart and Target. I'm talking about big grocery carts. And Safeway, I'll walk out with 2 30-packs of Budweiser. I'll be like, "Hey ladies, you want to come party?" And I'll like hook them up with some other dude and be like, "You know, have a great life. You know, best of luck to you."
Would you consider becoming the Pope? Because there is a position available.
Do I have to look like that first? How about I be Luke Skywalker and you show me where he is?
So your philosophy of life is what?
Let's see. I can't really say that phileo towards Sophia is necessarily mine, as it is an experience. So if you speak in Greek,
which I think you might be right now,
you'd probably be burning wood inside of your house right now.
Okay, all right. So you think we should? But when you burn wood, you have to chop down trees. Surely you cannot be in favor of that.
Well, if you live in close contact with the trees all the time, you notice that they grow branches every year.
Is that your dream, to build a tree house?
I can't call it.
And you enjoy your life, I assume?
Yeah, you enjoy yours?
Yeah, it's all right. I don't know. I mean, I think it seems like you enjoy yourself.
Uh-huh. So you're the snake, right?
Yeah, in China, yeah, but we're not there yet. We'll get there eventually.
Insinuations.
One of the things you said on the video was you wanted to get a wetsuit and a Minnie Mouse surfboard, right?
Uh-huh, and a box full of puppies, and they can prophesy that the Ravens are going to win, and then they can prove that ravens can also prophesy, and that's why the Queen of England locked 2 ravens in a cage up in the Tower of London.
Yeah, well, that goes without saying, but...
that was a big upset of PETA activists.
Let's step outside the car for 1 second, because I don't know if you're going to give this away immediately, but we have something for you. There he goes. The Minnie Mouse surfboard and the wetsuit. Do with it as you will. If you choose to give it away, then so be it. You all right, Kai? All right. Kai the Hitchhiker, everybody. Thanks, Kai. And thanks for not killing me with a hatchet. Hey, everybody. We got a good show tonight. Paul Reimer is here. Family of the Year. We'll be right back with Minnie Kaling.
Like I said, people were interested in capitalizing off Caleb's newfound internet fame. But I think you could kind of tell from the way that Caleb sounded and the way that he spoke on this Jimmy Kimmel segment that there appears to be something not quite right with him. He sounded a lot different in his viral video than he did in this little skit that he has with Jimmy Kimmel, picking him up in a car pretending to be a hitchhiker. And like I said, if you get a chance to look at the video on YouTube, you can kind of see that Caleb often looks confused and lost. And at the end, when you hear Jimmy say, "Thanks for not killing me with a hatchet," Caleb got this really weird look on his face. Jimmy was making jokes and making fun throughout those 8 minutes or so, which is his job and how he makes money. But looking back on this now, knowing what we know, there do seem to be some underlying issues going on with Caleb, and he was brought on that show to be laughed at and made fun of. But I don't even know if Caleb realized that this was at his own expense. However, there is no denying that there was something really charming and lovable about him in the video that made him famous. And that was the Caleb that Jimmy Kimmel was hoping to get on his show. But to me, they got a very different side of Caleb. And maybe it worked for Kimmel at the time, because everyone was having Caleb fever, except for me, apparently, who was having Jodi Arias fever. But looking back on this segment now, it's pretty cringe to watch. We'll talk a lot more about this video as we go along. I want to get back to some of the things that were said in the documentary. Okay, so towards the beginning of the documentary, when it's talking about Caleb going viral and everybody reaching out to Jessup Reisbeck about trying to get in touch with him to get interviews with Caleb or whatever, Jessup kind of framed it in a way where, because this guy was homeless, there was no surefire way of getting in touch with him. The thing was, Jessup did manage to get Caleb's email address. And while everyone around the world was blowing up Jessup's email, he stated in the documentary, quote, "As this thing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I knew that I had to talk to him again. I had to figure out more about him. I had to tell his story." So Jessup had sent out an email to Caleb about how everything about him was blowing up the internet, that people wanted to reach out to him, that he wanted to be the one to help. So yeah, it is what it is. Jessup is the one who got the world exclusive, and he's the one who knew how to get in touch with Caleb. So he was going to be the one the rest of the world was going to have to go through in order to get to him. I can see both sides of the situation, but yeah, like I said, it is what it is. People do what they got to do when they see an opportunity. So Caleb eventually made his way to a payphone and got back in touch with Jessup. This was just a few days after the whole incident that created the viral video in the first place. Caleb was still in California, so the powers that be at the station that Jessup worked at were like, "Do what you got to do." So they tracked him down in Stockton, California, and Jessup, the only person on the planet who knew how to get in touch with Caleb apparently, spotted him as he got into town. And he pulled over and they did another interview with him right there on the street. And then they went into a music store and Caleb picked up a guitar and began playing and sang an original that was pretty decent. So not only is this guy this accidental, unintentional hero, he's also got a measure of hidden talent. After that, Jessup and Caleb went to sit down and talk about the opportunities that were becoming available to him, such as going on to talk shows, possibly even developing his own reality show. And Jessup is being really super excited and enthusiastic about these money-making potentials and opportunities that they have there on their hands. But he's not really getting all that much of a reaction out of Caleb. And for Jessup, he doesn't quite get why Caleb isn't leaping at the chance to start making the millions of dollars that Jessup can clearly see in both of their futures, right? And just Caleb wasn't interested. In fact, he told Jessup that he'd rather head north to the Bay Area and smoke weed. Again, Jessup is dumbfounded that Caleb just couldn't care less about these potentially life-changing opportunities. And these people, they're just willing to give Caleb whatever he wants just to get him to do this. So they decided that they will send him all the marijuana that he wants. Let's just get this done. They've got these producers who want to get a deal going with Caleb to possibly have his own reality show, right? And it seemed like they've tentatively got him to agree to terms. But they for sure nailed down the appearance that he was going to make on Jimmy Kimmel's show. I honestly am not even sure if Caleb is in the right state of mind or mental wellness to even grasp the magnitude of what was going on around him, or if it was all just one big joke to him. It's really hard to tell. And I don't always feel comfortable making these types of assessments in terms of what's going on with the people that are surrounding Caleb in this situation. I know I can be judgy, but they are trying to do their jobs. But they're looking for this opportunity to cash in on Caleb's newfound fame. The whole idea is for everyone to make money, right? But that includes Caleb as well. He's the one who's the most down on his luck. He's homeless. He has no real place to stay. He claimed to have had no family. It's this whole sob story. But even Rolling Stone, who published an article about Caleb last month, called Jessup and everyone trying to get the next interview with Caleb media vultures. So I'm not the only one who was getting that vibe here. And me going on talking about this on my show, am I any better? Well, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. I don't make any money off of this, and it's free for all of you to listen to. In fact, I pay to publish this to all the podcast directories out there. I do want you to listen because you find the story interesting, and I want you to listen to my show because I want to help you relax and get through your day. But the Rolling Stone article did point out what I've been getting at up to this point, that everyone who was trying to get the next viral soundbite from Kai was overlooking the fact that there was something very, very unstable and unwell about Caleb. I think the red flags were kind of all over the place, especially in that Jimmy Kimmel segment. The Rolling Stone article stated, "A pack of media vultures immediately descended on the 24-year-old drifter, ignoring all signs of his mental instability. Brad Mulcahy, then a human interest researcher for Jimmy Kimmel Live, recalls corralling a heavily inebriated and publicly urinated Caleb for a pair of guest spots on the late-night show. Justin Bieber's team reached out about a musical collaboration. Lisa Samsky, a reality TV brand manager who worked on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, even recruited Caleb for a potential reality show. He signed that contract in hieroglyphs. We weren't exactly sure what the show was going to be, but I think what people saw at my company was Caleb could be a gateway to a world that we never saw. Homeless people living happily on the streets," Samke says, unaware of just how tone-deaf that sounds. So from this point forward, when I refer to these media people, I'm talking about Jessup from the Fresno television news station, the guy from Jimmy Kimmel, Brad Mulcahy, and this reality TV brand manager, Lisa Samsky. They're all working together to try to get Caleb to accept these couple of offers, and it just sounds like Jessup is sort of acting like his manager or whatever. So Caleb, up in Stockton, they needed to get him down to LA so he could start making these appearances and begin earning everybody some cash, right? But there's a slight logistics problem here. The dude has no forms of ID, so he can't fly, he can't take the train, he can't take the bus, so it's up to these media people to transport him. And from Stockton to LA, that's more than 5 hours by car. And remember, keep in mind that Caleb has become the most memeable viral internet sensation since Gangnam Style the year before. And he's famous for bludgeoning someone in the head with a freaking hatchet. Yeah, I get the potential lives that he saved here, but there's just something about that I find slightly disturbing. And when this little posse of TV people arrived in Santa Rosa, California, because Caleb managed to hitchhike his way down there from Stockton, I mean, this guy's pretty recognizable now. And, people are giving him rides in spite of the fact that he's famous for hatchet bludgeoning. When the TV people got there to Santa Rosa, Caleb reeked of booze. And it wasn't just residual. This guy was drunk. So to recap, he's homeless. He won't tell people his real name. He's a surfing musician from West Virginia, but not really. He hitchhikes around with whomever will take him wherever. He managed to get himself picked up by someone who was a mentally ill racist who tried to run somebody down with his car because the guy was black, whilst claiming he was Jesus Christ. And that guy, Jett McBride, was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was sentenced to 9 years of institutionalization at Escatero Maximum Security Mental Health Hospital. And during that ride, Caleb took with McBride. They bought and smoked weed together. And this was 3 years before it was legalized in California. And then Caleb went on to smash, suh-maaaashed the guy in the head 3 times with the hatchet. And then he gave a very bizarre yet somehow at the same time endearing interview to the Fox News affiliate in Fresno. And since then, he's still been drifting around California, with his main goals seeming to be for each day to get drunk and high. And we've got these television producers, reporters, scouts, researchers, whatever they are, trying to track this guy down because they somehow have it in their heads that this is their newest, hottest, latest internet sensation. And when they finally get to him to bring him down to the Kimmel show, he's drunk. And they know absolutely nothing about him. They don't even know his real name. Let me tell you a little bit more about Mr. Caleb Lawrence McGillivary. While it seems at times that Caleb was oblivious to all of the hoopla and media attention that he was getting following his viral video, I think he was quite well aware of everything that was going on, and it was likely the reason why he wasn't willing to tell anybody his real name or where he was really from, and why he initially turned down all of the offers that were being made to him about going on TV and possibly having his own reality show. And I think all of that is because he knew that the truth about who he was would potentially become exposed. In the time following his viral video, Caleb's behavior continued to be somewhat impulsive, out of control. He was often crude, irresponsible, and reckless. He frequently urinated in public. He was very rude to people, particularly women. And you've heard in the audio clips that I've played thus far just how many times this guy drops F-bombs everywhere he goes. It was constant. And he didn't care who was around. He used profanity freely and openly, even when there were young children within earshot. And while there wasn't anything yet as serious going on as any more hatchet bludgeonings, Caleb was generally a nuisance and a troublemaker. What appeared to be happening here was all of these media people were really blurring the lines between someone being this happy-go-lucky, home-free wanderer versus a person who is mentally ill, very troubled, and potentially close to becoming unhinged. So these TV people are taking Caleb down to Los Angeles, and they really want to lock Caleb into an exclusive deal with them. One of them had said in the documentary, quote, "Kimmel's going to do his thing. That'll be a one-off. What we need to make sure that we do before anybody else in Hollywood can get their grubby hands on him." I mean, that's a little pot calling the kettle black, right? "Here's the contract. Sign here." And this document that Caleb signed in hieroglyphics, it took him 10 minutes to sign it, and it was all over the paper. I mean, seriously, this whole thing is just crazy. And Jessup, he was trying to prepare these other media people who want these TV deals with Caleb to be prepared for the madness that comes from hanging out and talking to him. Caleb seems easygoing, but he is not an easy person. He seems like a nice person, but he's also crazy. You might think this is going to be fun, but it is not. It's difficult, it's draining, it's exhausting. So just be ready to basically want to pull your hair out after you've been around him for a little while. This is a warning that Jessup is giving these people. I mean, what are they thinking? I know Caleb had a viral moment, but there is nothing about that introduction to Caleb McGillivary, the person, that is in any way, shape, or form a true or genuine representation of the person that this guy really is. You want to know a good tip to take home with you as you go through life? If they're introduced to you as someone with the words hatchet-wielding included, there's probably a good chance that the best thing to do would just to be move right along. So Lisa Smansky, she's the one who drove Caleb down to Hollywood with another production person that she worked with, and they get him to the Roosevelt Hotel. This is where they're going to meet Brad Mulcahy from The Kimmel Show. It's going to be the first appearance that Caleb is going to do, the clip of which I already played. I decided to play it ahead of time, like I said, just so you know what it was already going to be like when we got to this part of the story. So Lisa dropped Caleb off with Brad, and she actually said to him, "Can you watch him while I valet the car?" What the hell is happening? If you have to ask someone to keep an eye on a grown man in public, I mean, she obviously has that much awareness of what's going on here with Caleb that she went so far as to have to tell Brad to keep an eye on him. They had to know that there was something not right with this guy. Brad, of course, didn't take it seriously because, like I said, Caleb is grown. Why would he have to keep an eye on him, right? Well, by the time Lisa had parked the car and she came back, she saw Caleb standing there on the Walk of Fame with his pants down, according to the documentary, and he's urinating on Julio Iglesias' star. If I were either one of these people, Brad or Lisa, I would be running the other direction as fast as I could to get as far away from this guy as possible. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near him. I mean, wow. I'm just blown away that they move forward with the appearance on Jimmy Kimmel, to be honest. You would think that these TV producers and whatnot would know better. And all Lisa could do was get upset at Brad for not keeping an eye on Caleb like she told him to do. Because it's Brad's fault that Caleb does shit like this, right? How the hell was he supposed to know that that was going to happen? Seriously? Whatever anybody's job is in this whole entire situation, that would not have been included. Nobody would need to be responsible for making sure a television guest kept his pants up in public and didn't urinate in the inappropriate places that this guy apparently enjoyed urinating in. No way. Not in the job description, not in any pay grade. So they get Caleb this room at the historic 4-star Roosevelt Hotel, named after President Theodore Roosevelt, right across the street from where Kimmel films his TV show, where notable guests have included Marilyn Monroe, who actually lived there for 2 years, Errol Flynn, Shirley Temple, Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Patterson, Charlie Chaplin, H.G. Wells, Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Prince, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. Yeah, it's pretty glamorous. So, Mr. urinating on the sidewalk, now that he's emptied his bladder, he goes into this hotel and he makes a beeline for the minibar like it's his long-lost best friend that he hadn't seen in decades. And because it's a minibar, that doesn't mean it's stocked with mini bottles. The fridge is stocked with full-size bottles of liquor. And Caleb went right for the bottle of Jack. And he didn't even pour himself a glass of whiskey. He chugged it till it was gone. No matter. These TV people are committed. They're going to get this guy on Kimmel. They've got some ideas brewing for this reality show. No matter, he just downed a bottle of Jack. They just decide to go to get something to eat. And well, Caleb decided that in order to do that, he needed to bring his skateboard along. And I guess Lisa didn't feel the need to tell a grown man to please leave his toys in his hotel room. They get down to the lobby. And remember, this is a very nice hotel. It's very old Hollywood glamorous. Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, all those people. So I looked up pictures of the lobby of this place because I haven't actually been inside. And these floors are made out of these beautiful designs with these mosaic tiles. And this asshat is riding around on his skateboard in the lobby. I mean, this place is just beautiful. There's chandeliers and high ceilings and columns and marble. And here he is on a skateboard. And these tiles are acting like rumble plates. And he's just rolling around and rumbling across the floor, and it's so loud throughout the lobby that it drew the attention of hotel security, who promptly ejected Caleb and everyone that was with him out of the hotel. Meaning Brad Mulcahy, the guy from Jimmy Kimmel, Lisa, and her production guy. All of them were told to get the F out. So then Caleb started running up and down the sidewalk. Then he pulled out a large knife and tried to throw it into the ground, I guess trying to get it to dramatically land standing up. And finally, this is when these people are starting to wonder, what have they gotten themselves into? This is turning out not to be this lovable, happy, homeless guy that they saw in the video. And Lisa, for the first time, is starting to question, why is it that she's having to babysit this grown man until he somehow finds his way onto the Jimmy Kimmel stage? So, with no hotel, Lisa, still not ready to give up or beginning to feel concerned for her own personal safety yet, decided that she would just take Caleb home and babysit him there, apparently. And while Caleb managed to control his impulses and use the appropriate facilities to relieve himself, Lisa was still combating her own common sense, wanting to continue to chase this next big thing. But, at the same time, she's wondering if she's potentially got a serious problem on her hands with essentially the stranger inside her home. But he ended up being there for the weekend. He was set to be on Jimmy Kimmel that Monday, and by then Lisa was having doubts if the reality show idea was even going to be a thing, if it was even possible, because Caleb didn't seem to be excited to be on the Jimmy Kimmel show as perhaps the average person would be to have that opportunity. Again, I think that has to do with who he is, Caleb's real name, his background, and his past, which is also quite troubling. And he could be thinking that this is really going to be exposing himself, not just indecently. But once he's on national TV, the truth about who he is could very well come to light. That's the reasons why I think Caleb isn't showing enthusiasm for all of these quote-unquote opportunities. So Lisa got Caleb over to the studio where they would be filming the segment on Jimmy Kimmel. And when Caleb got out of the car, he walked over to a nearby Jimmy Kimmel banner and proceeded to urinate on it. Seriously, I still can't believe they've moved forward this far with this guy. Security came over again, telling him to stop, don't do that, whatever. But yet Caleb is still invited to continue on with this. He goes in and he meets Jimmy, they take their pictures, and then Jimmy gave Caleb an envelope that contained $500. But what Caleb did was he gave that money to the security guard who caught him urinating on the Jimmy Kimmel banner and apologized for doing that. On the segment, however, Jimmy told the audience that Caleb gave the money away. So clearly, Caleb has the capacity to understand that his behavior is off-putting. But what's even more troubling is the fact that nobody stepped in to put a stop to this appearance on the show. That is how badly everyone wanted to continue to capitalize on this so-called viral sensation. None of this disgusting behavior is causing anybody to seriously rethink what they're doing. They can see that this guy is clearly a nutcase, but no matter, we've got to have the homeless, hitchhiking, hatchet-wielding hero on the show. So in the meantime, back in Fresno, they're still working on getting Jett McBride's case. So he's facing some attempted murder and hate crime charges. And they had been looking for Caleb because he is an important witness that needs to be subpoenaed, but the DA's office was having a hard time tracking him down. They eventually got word through social media that he was appearing on the Kimmel Show, so the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department sent a couple of deputies over to the Kimmel Show, and they showed up and detained him for about an hour. And everyone at that point was thinking that they weren't going to be able to get him to do this segment. Nothing else was going to stop them except for him being detained by law enforcement. Well, they ended up releasing him just in time, and Caleb managed to do his 8 minutes or so on the show. After that, they tried doing another short skit for the next day with Caleb, And the idea being that he would do these movie reviews in his own unique, homeless, hatchet-wielding hitchhiker style, but it kind of bombed. Caleb couldn't do it. He couldn't focus, and he wasn't funny. I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious from the segment in the day before that Caleb was not funny. Jimmy Kimmel himself had done a pretty good job of carrying him, but to me, the whole thing was a flop. Once Caleb's time in Hollywood was done, Jimmy arranged for him to have transportation to wherever it was he wanted to go to next, and he wanted to go back to Northern California, and with that, away he went. For a time, Caleb was enjoying his fame. It appeared like he was having fun. He was being recognized everywhere. People were taking and posting pictures and videos of him, surfing, hanging 10, playing music, smoking, drinking, peeing, drinking some more, getting tattoos, including a huge tattoo that he got on the side of his face, which is one of the things that got other people who knew Caleb's happy-go-lucky homeless self on the internet to begin to see a little bit of a different side of him, that maybe that there was something more going on inside that head of his. The tattoo was a little bit troubling, but for the most part, by the looks of it, it seemed like Caleb was living his best life. But after that experience with him in Hollywood, all of those TV people who were interested in having him star in a reality show, it seems like they'd moved on from that idea, realizing that this guy did not have the focus or the mental capacity to star in anything. The only reason why he made it through Kimmel Live was because of Kimmel himself being able to turn something unfunny into something funny. Caleb was called to testify at McBride's pretrial hearing, and it's there he recalled the whole incident, hitchhiking, getting picked up, smoking weed together, and then how McBride drove his car into that group of utility workers, pinning and injuring Rayshawn Neely, who was in court in a wheelchair. Now, the officers investigating this case said in the documentary that, yeah, Caleb had been hailed a hero in all this, and helping to save Tanya's life was admirable, but there had been some talk between Caleb and McBride prior to the crash where they were smoking weed and talking about turning into ghosts, and either one or both of them began discussing how if they crashed into that utility truck, that they would go right through it because they were ghosts. And when they tried it, obviously, they didn't go right through it, and they seriously injured Mr. Neely. So it had investigators feeling like Caleb had more of a role in what happened, but that pretty much got pushed aside because of the notoriety he garnered from the viral video and subsequent internet fame as a result of him apparently saving the day with the hatchet. And when looking back on that viral video and taking everything that Caleb was saying into consideration, it was also starting to dawn on Jessup Reisbeck that, yeah, we've got a relatively violent individual here. The way that Caleb recalled smashing McBride in the head with his hatchet, they showed the injuries to McBride's head, and they're pretty graphic. Caleb drove that blade very violently into this man's head. And during an interview, when Jessup asked Caleb if anything like this had ever happened to him before, Caleb recalled another time when he came across yet another damsel in distress. Some man was attacking her, and so Caleb just came up again and described it as smashing this guy in the head, this time with his fist, knocking the man's teeth out, and Caleb showed Jessup some of the scars on his hands. The excitable way that Caleb talked about these violent encounters, in hindsight, is very disturbing, but at the time, nobody was really seeing that. There's this one part of the documentary that I wanted to make sure I told you about, and I'm sorry if I'm boring you with stuff that you've already watched, but there were some people out there who weren't so easily taken or fooled by Caleb from their first meeting with him. In the midst of all this internet fame, I mentioned earlier that there had been talks for like a minute regarding Caleb possibly doing a collaboration with Justin Bieber. Well, up in Fresno, there was this band called the Redcoats, I guess like the British soldiers, and they talked about doing a gig with Caleb. They had seen him playing guitar in some of his online videos, and his singing was pretty good, so they thought maybe they could drum up some business, get some faces in the audience if they got Caleb to come and perform with them. So Caleb shows up to this venue. It's like a local club or a bar in Fresno, and he's being pretty demanding from the start. Kind of like this "do you know who I am" attitude, give me free beer. And everyone was like, yeah, no, we don't do that, and we don't care who you are. So as he's standing around getting ready for his gig, Caleb was telling the Redcoats about the hitchhiking hatchet day, recounting what all happened, like he probably did a million times. So Caleb's got to the part where he's smoking weed with Jett McBride, and he said that the joint that he gave him was laced. What it was laced with, I don't know, but that it was laced, and as soon as it all started hitting McBride, he wasn't able to handle it, and he started tripping and losing it because he couldn't handle his drugs. And while most everyone was kind of chuckling about the story, the lead singer of the Redcoats is kind of thinking like, wait a minute, because he knew the whole backstory about Caleb and being a hatchet hero and all that junk, right? So what he's hearing here is, you gave this guy a lace joint, you essentially drugged this man, and then this man starts to lose it and hallucinate and no longer has any control. He crashes his car and he starts attacking people, but then Caleb, the one who drugged him, ends up saving the day from this crazy man who is crazy because he drugged him. And he's walking around this brand new, shiny, sparkly hero. Well, in the end, the tests that were run on Mr. McBride, they didn't find any other drugs in his system except for weed. But you have to test for certain things in order for certain things to show up. But either way, Caleb very quickly pivoted back to getting all philosophical about life and having a good attitude and being happy. But then it all suddenly turned dark when Caleb followed up that pep talk with, unless some old man F's you in the ass. And you have to keep it real and take him out. And then he suddenly switched back to everything being all peace, love, and rainbows and butterflies. But anyway, Caleb did his set, after which he was expeditiously kicked out of the venue for going pee outside in their bushes, and he would no longer be welcome back. And because of the way Fresno is, apparently, you can get a bad reputation just as fast as you can get viral on the internet. And soon, Caleb decided that for whatever reason, he had enough of Fresno, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure it was the other way around and Fresno had had enough of him, and he decided to move on from there. In the world of true crime, it's rare that we find ourselves believing in coincidences. And there are certain things in Caleb's life that just seem to happen to him that don't happen to us. Sometimes these things don't ever happen to any of us throughout our entire lives. But they seem to happen to Caleb, and not just once, sometimes twice apparently. How many of us are ever going to find ourselves in a situation where we are called upon to save someone's life, and to actually go and do that, and to save someone's life by bashing them about the head in order to thwart an attack? Unless you're a cop or a superhero, chances are you're not going to run into that situation very often. But Caleb here managed to somehow find himself in at least 2 situations that we know of where both times a woman was being attacked, and he saved the day by beating the first guy in the face, knocking out his teeth, and then the second time bludgeoning the guy in the head with a hatchet. And then there was a comment that Caleb made to the band when he was talking about living a positive, happy life. Unless you're going to be raped by some old dude, then you have to beat the shit out of him. Here again, we're going to have these repetitive themes in Caleb's life, and it goes back to his childhood, and we'll get into that. Caleb did admit to Jessup in their second interview that when he was 17 and drifting around Canada, he was in British Columbia when a man attacked him and sexually assaulted him. Jessup got that on video, but he didn't air that as part of any of his segments back in 2013 when Caleb was all the rage. Caleb said in that interview that he managed to get away, but I read a report that the man who did that was arrested and charged but was never convicted. Bear in mind that we have to kind of take what Caleb says with a grain of salt, like I said earlier, because we just don't really know if what he's saying is true or partially true. But even if it is only partially true, it's still really terrible, some of these things that he's talking about. And remember, in his viral video, Caleb, who was calling himself Kai, said that he didn't have any family, that anybody who grew up with would consider him to be dead. So it was surprising when he suddenly showed up on the internet and on the TV as Kai the Hitchhiker. And one of his cousins who grew up with him, a gentleman by the name of Jeremy McGillivary Wolf, he corroborated some of the abuse that Caleb had alleged. Caleb had told Jessup that when he was a child, that he was locked in a cage and treated like an animal for 4 years, that his mom and his stepfather put locks on the outside of his bedroom door. Cousin Jeremy described Caleb as loud, funny, and mischievous, and while his cousin said that while his childhood was relatively normal, that he was allowed to do the things that boys like to do, like go outside and play, he did say that Caleb was never allowed to do that. He was always made to stay home, and that his mother did indeed keep him locked inside his bedroom with heavy blankets keeping the room blacked out. She even tried to lock Jeremy in the bedroom too, so his cousin knew that Caleb had a pretty terrible childhood. At some point, Caleb had attempted to light a fire inside the family home, and it was shortly after that that Caleb's mother simply couldn't deal with him. So at the age of 13, she sent him to a youth group home called Bosco Homes, which is mired in its own controversies. So yeah, Caleb was sent to a group home when he was 13, a place where troubled teens and runaways are taken to. Kids that didn't have a place to go, or, like in Caleb's situation, their parents didn't want to deal with them anymore. I'm not saying that that's the reason why all parents send their kids to these group homes, and I understand that there are some parents who simply are beside themselves and don't know how to deal with a troubled youth, but to me, the vibe that I got from Caleb's mom is, it's like what I said. She didn't want to deal with him. Jeremy said that Caleb was prone to losing his temper and would get extremely upset if he thought that he was being made fun of. So he had some difficulties when it came to reading and understanding social cues, which I think was still very apparent in that Jimmy Kimmel video. Anyway, Jeremy said that Caleb's bout with rage would vanish just as quickly as they surfaced. Caleb would later go on to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder and PTSD stemming from childhood abuse and neglect. And that falls in line with the things his cousin was describing in the documentary. Caleb would seem to be okay until something happened that would trigger him. Now, Caleb's mom was interviewed for the documentary too, and this woman is such a liar. She denied locking him in a room. And then she used air quotes when she said, like, lock him in a room. There's no air quotes that need to go around a statement like that. There's no changing what that means. There's no nice way to say it. She locked Caleb in his room. Caleb said it, his cousin witnessed it, and she tried to do it to the cousin too. Caleb's mom is very measured in what she says and how she says it. And she stumbles her way through the things that she says because I think she's lying. I had to put for a short period of time stop the ability of him getting out of the room too early because he was a free spirit. What kind of bullcrap, hogwash, nonsensical rubbish is that? He's a free spirit, so I had to stop his ability to get out of the room too early? She said he would get up earlier than she did and get into stuff that could harm him, and being a responsible parent needed to not allow that to happen. That's a direct quote. What in the holy heck does this woman think she's saying, trying to get over on us being a responsible parent? How about waking your ass up and, I don't know, parent? Who the hell stops their kid from getting up because they're a free spirit? Come on, lady. We know what you did. You locked your kid up in his room, and he was awake too early because he had been locked up the whole day and night before. Responsible parent. The responsible parent would get their lazy ass out of bed. And then she only kept him until he was 13 years old. I don't know. Maybe Caleb did wake up too early, but putting a door lock on the outside of a child's bedroom is not the solution. I don't know anyone who ever put a lock on the outside of their child's door. Working on changing the behavior is the solution, and it's not that complicated. Having your child getting up too early is kind of the opposite problem that most parents have with their kids in the mornings. I had to get my kid up every single morning, beginning in preschool, all the way through high school. There was never a day when my kid got up and told me, "Hey, Mom, I'm ready to get the day started. How about you?" Like, never happened. Caleb's mom said that it was for a short period of time, and I don't believe that. If you want to literally lock your child inside their bedroom so you can stay in bed, chances are that door was locked all night long. Not that I believe that that's the reason why she would do it. Putting locks on the outside of doors is a long-term solution for a lengthy period of time for that child to be forced to stay in their bedroom. And not only is it a fire safety issue, it goes against fire codes. It's definitely a red flag and potential reason for your home to be visited by Child Protective Services. And locking, trapping, caging your child inside a room can be scary, disturbing, and traumatizing for a child, especially if they're alone. And we know that Caleb's mom put heavy dark blankets on the windows. So not only is Caleb trapped and alone, it's dark. And there are no experts in this world who would ever recommend that this be a solution to parents needing to get more sleep for any amount of time. Caleb's mom said it was for a short period of time, quote, for his best interest and the safety of, a little guy. And then she has more BS when she says that medical experts wondered if Caleb had ADHD and things like that. And, recently I was in a Zoom group therapy session and we talked about this very topic. And we watched a TED Talk about adverse childhood experiences. And when parents would come to their doctors or pediatricians with behavioral problems with their children, oftentimes the go-to answer was, "Oh, your kid has ADHD," and then they would prescribe medications. But when the experts decided to stop and take a closer look and conducted studies, they found that a majority of those children whose parents were told that their children had ADHD had experienced or were experiencing some form of childhood abuse or neglect. ADHD was just a label to put on the side effect of those experiences. And it really was just the week before that I watched this documentary when I was in that Zoom meeting and they were discussing this. And come to find, here she is saying this exact same thing about her son. And what this has done now, these doctors have been giving these parents an answer to their problems that alleviates the responsibility off of them and places the blame for the child's behavior on the child. Effectively, parents are being told that there's a reason why your child is acting up, and it has nothing to do with the abuse or neglect that they've been subjecting their children to, which almost in a way reinforces abusive behavior. Like, I can keep abusing my child because it's their fault they're bad, not mine. I'm not saying that all children who have been diagnosed with ADHD have been abused, neglected, or have otherwise experienced childhood traumas. I'm just saying that there may be some underlying problems that have manifested into these adverse behaviors. So then Caleb's mom said, so they wondered if he had ADHD or things like that, but kind of in the end, there wasn't actually one diagnosis that was anything. It was kind of their grasp at how do we help? How do we do this? How do we navigate this? And Time did it. That all was a direct quote from Caleb's mom. Time. She said time cured him. Seriously? Yeah, no. I just can't with this woman. They didn't come up with a diagnosis because I'm certain that his mother wasn't admitting to his doctors that she was locking him up in his bedroom and forbidding him from being able to go outside and play with his friends and his cousins. It was that significant for Caleb's cousin to recall what it was like all these years later, and that she tried to do it to him too. Caleb's cousin said that Caleb would be in that room during the day, but the windows would be blacked out with dark blankets. But Caleb would be able to hear children playing outside, so he would be aware that it was daytime, not nighttime. So obviously, this wasn't something that she was doing in the early morning hours for the safety of the little guy. And she didn't even say the little guy, she said a little guy. Did you notice that? How much this woman distanced herself from her son in that one small statement with that one tiny word? She didn't say my little guy. She certainly didn't say my son. She said a little guy. I don't go around with my kid and refer to her to people, oh, this is a daughter. Always we use the possessive word my kid, my son, my daughter. But this woman couldn't even bring herself to own her own motherhood. So they didn't come up with a diagnosis because she wasn't being candid and forthcoming about the dynamics in the family home and what was really going on behind locked doors and blanketed windows. And then she said that quote-unquote time worked out the problems. Yeah, what she meant to say is that she sent him to a controversial youth group home when he was 13 years old and washed her hands of her problem. So this woman is literally sitting there telling us that time worked out Caleb's behavioral problems, that one day she just woke up and poof, all his problems magically disappeared. Yeah, no. You disappeared, lady, disappeared from his life and put him into the foster care system. Time did it, she said. Time. Yeah. Caleb was 6 years into adulthood when the world got to know him. And we very quickly found out just how disturbed, troubled, and mentally ill the little guy actually was. They say that the brain development gets disrupted when abuse and neglect begins, and whatever age that starts at is where the abused child remains mentally and emotionally. So when it comes to the Caleb that we all got to know on the internet, along with his subsequent behavior, would you say that he was acting immature and childish? That might be one way of describing it. The problem is he's an adult man doing adult man things with the maturity level of a child. And that's where he finds himself in trouble. So when Caleb's mom goes on to say, quote, I didn't realize he had become very famous, but then she goes on to talk about all his fame. And then she said, and there's real, genuine people out there who wanted to reach out and say, hey, way to go, buddy, and hey, we're here for you. And I don't think that that part was necessarily bad. He loves people, very much an outgoing person, but I was a bit concerned because he's a very trusting person, and I know that not everybody should be trusted. And you know what, dreamers? I don't think that this woman had any business at this point trying to feign concern for the son that she dumped into the foster care system at the age of 13. And I'm by no means an expert here, but this outgoingness that Caleb's mom is describing him as being, his outgoing personality, I think that's the simple way of describing Caleb. To me, he seems to be a very damaged and traumatized man who suffered a great deal of abuse and neglect as a child. And while it appeared to be something along the lines of ADHD, which he was never officially diagnosed as having because his mom seems to think that time magically cured him. As an adult, this outgoing personality appears to me to be a lack of impulse control combined with alcohol and substance abuse that lowers his inhibitions. In order for Caleb to become Kai, he had to constantly be drunk, high, or both. And yeah, Caleb became super popular because he was this free-spirited, home-free, accidental hero that endeared the public with his whimsical personality and his cool, laid-back vibe. But the fact is, what everyone seemed to be overlooking was that the public was hailing a very unhinged and unstable transient wielding a hatchet. And the last I checked, the only place most of us really want to find any kind of person wielding a hatchet or an axe would be in a horror movie. So yeah, Caleb's final act is still yet to come. Oh, and I'm not finished with his mom yet. She talked more about trust. She stated, Caleb is a person who always led with his heart, and because of that, he's very trusting, and I'm not sure that's always healthy for people. And I certainly see in the situation with my son where I'm not sure it was the best, in that I think it put him in a situation that possibly set him up. And then she was asked by the interviewer to clarify, and Caleb's mom continued, as in that he was trusting the wrong people. To an extent, I'll say that she's not wrong. I believe Caleb was being taken advantage of by Jessup and all the other TV people who were trying to lock Caleb down into some television deals. Now, granted, they didn't realize what they were dealing with in terms of all the mental health and substance abuse issues swirling around Caleb, but I still think it was reckless and irresponsible of them to continue to try and push forward with their plans for Caleb while the red flags and warning signs were popping up all over the place. However, I don't think Caleb was being trusting at all. In fact, I'd say he was being very guarded about everything, including his real name, his identity. He wasn't revealing anything to anyone. And he was playing along for a while because everyone was putting all of this pressure on him to perform like a trained monkey in front of all of these cameras. When you really think about it, Caleb was probably at his peak in that very first interview that he gave with Jessup. He had just been smoking some weed. The driver who picked him up, Jett McBride, gave him money to purchase some. So that was like a huge score for Caleb, right? He got to smoke, he got a ride to wherever he's headed to next, and then he gets into this car accident. So his high is getting seriously harshed by this excitement, adrenaline, fear. All of this shit starts happening around him, all this craziness, and he's seeing people getting hurt and attacked by this very large, irate, out of control man yelling nonsensical things. And it is commendable that Caleb thought quickly to grab a weapon to stop McBride from continuing to hurt people, aware that he wasn't going to be able to take on McBride without one because of their size differences. And Caleb bludgeoned the guy 3 times in the head. And all of that culminated in Kai, the homeless hitchhiking hatchet-wielding hero that the internet went bonkers for. That was probably the best and most real version of Caleb that we were ever going to see in the excitement of all of those things coming together at once. And that was it. That was peak Caleb, the hatchet guy, because we are about to meet the worst side of him. And it would only be a matter of 3 months worth of internet fame for Caleb to fall from his 15 minutes. On the morning of May 13th, 2013, a 70-year-old Clark, New Jersey attorney named Joseph Galfy Jr. was discovered laying on the floor of his bedroom, beaten to death, in the home in which he lived for about 15 years. Mr. Galfy had a court date scheduled that Monday morning, so when he failed to show up for that, his office assistant tried calling his cell phone but received no answer. So next she called Mr. Galfy's neighbor, and he said that he would go over there and check on him to see if he was okay. When the neighbor got to Mr. Galfy's house, he found that the newspaper from the day before and that same morning, neither one of them had been picked up, which was unusual because Mr. Galfy was an avid reader of the New York Times. So that was enough for the neighbor to go ahead and contact law enforcement and request that a welfare check be conducted. And it was then when police entered the home that they discovered Mr. Galfy's lifeless body. He was laying in a pool of blood at the foot of his bed in the master bedroom. The only things that he had on were his underwear and a pair of socks. And there really didn't seem to be anything else out of the ordinary, unusual, or out of place, with the exception of Mr. Galfy being dead. It did not appear that a struggle had taken place. There was no ransacking. Nothing seemed to be missing. The place was generally very organized and well kept, and nor were there any signs of any forced entry. However, near Mr. Galfy's computer in the living room, investigators did find a piece of paper with the name Lawrence Kai, along with a phone number written on it. Lawrence is Caleb's middle name. Kai, of course, is Caleb's internet name. So investigators, they went and Googled Kai, and the top result turned out to be the homeless hatchet-wielding hitchhiker hero. So these cops are looking at this video, and when they see him go smash, smash, suh-maaaashed, they were like, yeah, that looks like what their victim, Mr. Galfy here, ran into himself, Mr. Smash, 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 right? So among the pieces of evidence investigators collected, they found a one-way train ticket from Rahway, which is in New Jersey but considered a part of the Manhattan metropolitan area, and the ticket was purchased the day before, which was Sunday, May 12th. So investigators from the Union County Prosecutor's Office located the surveillance footage from the New Jersey Transit Rahway station, and in that footage they could see Mr. Galfy purchasing a train ticket from a vending machine. And this video is some good quality video, and he handed the ticket off to someone that's to the left and was at first off camera. Well, barely off camera, but it also appeared that this person that he's giving the ticket to is being obscured by a pillar. At some point, the person who received this train ticket stepped forward just enough for his backside to come into view, and it turned out to be a man with long, wavy, dark hair carrying a backpack, and this man gave Mr. Galfy a hug. From there, they walked towards the train platform to wait for the next train to come. So at that point, what investigators had here was they had this Kai the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker over in California on video, plus this video footage of this train ticket-having companion of Mr. Galfy's clear across the country over there in New Jersey. And what they're wondering is, are these two people really one and the same? There are points in the video from the train platform where you can see the front side of the man, and yeah, it's obviously Caleb. He's got his shaggy hair and that bandana on his head. So the New Jersey authorities contacted their California counterparts up in Fresno, and they were able to confirm that, yeah, hitchhiking hatchet guy is in fact the same person as train passenger platform guy. And their initial impressions of Caleb over in Jersey were way different than our impressions were of him over here in Fresno. They can see that Caleb was a guy who was a transient, who basically bummed pretty much everything in life off of other people, that he takes advantage of people wherever he goes, and now he has somehow managed to meander his way over into their jurisdiction in Jersey. Because they did have their doubts at first that this guy was some sort of cross-country traveler, but apparently he was. And with that, Caleb McGillivary became a very strong person of interest in Mr. Joseph Galfy's murder. Authorities in New Jersey focused on tracking Caleb down. The phone number they had for him, the one that they found in Mr. Galfy's house, was no longer in service. So they turned to the media and let it be known that they were looking for Caleb, aka the Hatchet-Wielding Hitchhiker, in connection with Mr. Galfy's murder. And they let it be known that if anyone were to run across him or see him, to not approach, do not try to apprehend, because they considered him to be armed and very dangerous. And authorities were worried because they had no idea where he could be. He's a drifter. He depends on the public for help getting from place to place to place. They know he has a propensity for violence based on what they saw in Caleb's viral video. The concern was very real that there was potential for him to hurt more unsuspecting people. So the word was quickly spreading that Caleb was wanted for murder. Jessup, the sports reporter turned pseudo-publicist, caught wind that Caleb was wanted by New Jersey authorities. Caleb's mom found out from another one of her children. And in her interview in the documentary, when she described hearing about Caleb being wanted for murder, she laughed and said, "Well, crap, what happened?" Because that's really funny news to be laughing at, right? Anyway, a warrant was issued for Caleb's arrest out of Union County. Pictures of Caleb were all over the news, all across the country. All the people who were trying to take advantage of Caleb, getting him those TV deals on signed contracts and whatnot, were like, "Oh my gosh, I hung out with this guy. He could have killed me, blah, blah, blah." I guess the fact that all of them were chasing and hunting Caleb down for TV spots and opportunities forgot that the only reason that they were doing that in the first place was because he beat a guy over the head with a hatchet. But yeah, never mind that, right? So stupid. I mean, seriously, everyone was so enamored with this charming little drifter that they were willing to forget all about that so that they could make their money off this latest Insta-famous person. And Jessup, in the documentary, remember, he was like the original gatekeeper when it came to all things Kai the Hatchet guy, right? He started getting attention and phone calls and emails, etc., all over again now that Caleb was wanted for murder. So now he's got his second 15 minutes. But he did say that all he ever wanted was good things for Caleb, which, I don't doubt that. But that still doesn't take away how much these TV people were all trying to take advantage of him. Because I brought it up earlier when I was talking about Caleb's cousin, Jeremy, and he said that Caleb had a hard time if he thought someone was making fun of him. It was hard for him to tell if people were laughing with him or if they were laughing at him. And that falls in line with difficulty understanding and interpreting social cues, which can be associated with people who may be on the autism spectrum. But, according to Caleb's mom, the passage of time ironed out all those wrinkles. I mean, did that happen before or after she dumped him off at the group home? I'd really like to know because she didn't specify. But anyways, the authorities were searching for Caleb as he was wanted for Mr. Galfy's murder. And then, the next day after Mr. Galfy's body was found, who pops up on Facebook with a very graphic post? Well, to me, it's not only graphic, but it appeared to be an attempt to be laying the foundation for a case for self-defense. I'm not going to tell you what it says word for word, but you can look it up for yourself. It's still up, it's public, but paraphrasing, Caleb wrote, "What would you do if you woke up with a groggy head, a metallic taste in your mouth, in a stranger's house, walked to the mirror," and he basically said that his face had been ejaculated on and that he started retching, realizing that someone drugged you and raped you and did that. What would you do? And he was getting comments on his post and he was replying to them. But then somewhere along the line, someone posted the link to the news reports that Caleb was wanted for murder. So in backing up a little bit in the timeline, the day before Mr. Galfy's body was discovered, it was Sunday, May 12th, and that also happened to be Mother's Day. Through the investigation into Caleb, as the authorities were searching for him, they found out that on that day, Caleb was texting with a woman who came to know him through his internet notoriety. She's referred to as fan number 1, but her name is Kim. They became acquainted through social media, and they had plans to hang out or to go to dinner or whatever on that Sunday evening, but Caleb ended up kind of flaking out, or the plans fell through, something like that. But Kim ended up receiving some calls and text messages from Caleb beginning later on that evening, and it was past the time that they had originally planned to meet up. He was texting that he needed a place to stay, and he was calling several times in a row, asking for a ride, telling her that he was stuck in Clark, New Jersey. And in a voicemail, he said that the place he was planning on staying didn't pan out, and he wanted her to drive up there to pick him up. But the problem was, he said that his phone battery kept dying. Well, anyway, somehow Caleb managed to make it down to a beachside town called Asbury Park during the night of May 12th going into the 13th, where he did eventually meet up with Kim. And she would later say that when she saw him, she noted that he looked very different because he had cut his hair short. And that was one of the more recognizable things about Caleb, was his long, shaggy, curly hair pulled back with the bandana. And he also had, by this time, a large face tattoo. It was an important detail because Caleb did look much different with his hair short. You wouldn't immediately know that he was the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker with this new updated look. It would be 4 days later, on May 16th, at a Starbucks in Philadelphia, that a barista saw Caleb, knew that authorities were looking for him, and contacted local law enforcement. But by the time the cops showed up, Caleb had already left. They began searching the surrounding areas, and they ended up finding him at a Greyhound bus station, and at that point, Caleb was taken into custody. There are some clips of Caleb's police interrogation from the day that he was arrested in the documentary, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he's actually sounding pretty lucid. He doesn't have his California surfer dude intonation anymore, and he's sitting there telling them what happened. He said that he met Joseph Galfy in Times Square. They struck up a conversation, and they found out they were both headed to New Jersey. Mr. Galfy asked Caleb if he wanted to get some food, and at some point they ended up at Mr. Galfy's house, and Caleb just told the officers that were interrogating him at first Mr. Galfy was nice, but then he ended up raping him. It's actually kind of weird and odd, but after Caleb said that he was raped, one of the officers completely ignored that very serious statement and asked what they had for dinner. He just kind of jumped over it like it was never even said. Anyway, Caleb said after dinner they drank beers and watched TV, and he said he started feeling tired, so he went to bed. And when he got up, he said that he had this taste in his mouth, just like he had described in his Facebook post, and it's pretty gross. So from there, Caleb claimed that Mr. Galfy took him to the train station and bought him a ticket to Asbury Park. This was the interaction that was captured on the surveillance video at the train platform, and they shared that embrace. So he went to go meet that friend, and he said that those plans fell through. That would be Kim. And so he got back in touch with Mr. Galfy and asked if he could stay at his place again. So Mr. Galfy went to go pick him up, and they went back to his house for a second time. Caleb claimed that Mr. Galfy made hamburgers for dinner, they drank a few beers, and he didn't remember anything after that. Caleb said that the next morning he remembered waking up to find Mr. Galfy trying to take his clothes off, and that he started to get aggressive. So Caleb said that he started hitting him, he thought with his bare hands, and he claimed to have not been able to remember anything. He said that maybe he kneed him or elbowed him, but he just kept hitting him in the head. And at that point, Caleb asked for an attorney, which is a smart move that we say a lot of suspects need to do before speaking to police. So, listening to this interrogation, seeing Caleb lay out his story about self-defense, and then asking for an attorney, it has you thinking that Caleb might not be as crazy as we started to think he was at this point. He's calm, he's articulate, he's well-spoken, and he knew enough to be asking for an attorney before going any further, which is a heck of a lot smarter than most of the people we talk about on this podcast. The police from the start were not believing Caleb's claim of self-defense because he had no defensive wounds, although I don't think that that's a particularly good reason to not believe someone's claims of self-defense, but either way, Caleb would go on to be charged with first-degree murder. In speaking to Kim later on, the investigators found out from her that she had initiated contact with Caleb through social media and told him that if he was ever in New Jersey, she would be able to help him find a place to stay. On Saturday, May 11th, the day before the murder took place, Caleb sent text messages to Kim and told her that he had met an older guy, an attorney named Joe, in Times Square, and that he offered him a place to stay. Kim said that they had plans to meet with Caleb the next day, as I mentioned earlier, in Asbury Park, but she wasn't there when Caleb showed up that Sunday morning. They made new plans, which involved Caleb going with her to Philadelphia the next day, which would have been Monday the 13th. In the meantime, Caleb made arrangements to go back to Mr. Galfy's house on the evening of Sunday the 12th. So the murder happened sometime on that Sunday. And from there, Caleb began calling Kim, as mentioned earlier, telling him that his place to stay fell through, when the truth was he had killed the guy who owned the place where he had been invited to stay. Kim said at the time that Caleb was making those calls, she wasn't able to answer her phone. Around 10 or 10:15 that night, Caleb showed up at a restaurant in Clark, New Jersey. It was called the White Diamond Diner. There he struck up a conversation with a guy named Robert McNamara and his brother. Caleb showed them the viral video of himself and asked them for directions to Rahway. About an hour later or so, a gentleman named Alexander McHugh, an employee at a 7-Eleven, also located in the city of Clark, saw Caleb and recognized him as the Hatchet-Wielding Hitchhiker. Caleb asked for directions to the Rahway train station. He told Caleb that he thought there might be a train station there in Clark, but Caleb told him he was looking to get out of Clark. He didn't want to head back in that direction. Alexander McHugh told Caleb to keep walking across the street, that was the border of the city of Rahway. After that, Caleb left the 7-Eleven. New Jersey train conductor Robert Scully reported that while he was working the overnight shift on the train between the city of Long Branch, which is a short distance north of Asbury Park, and New York City, he took Caleb's train ticket, but saw that it was for the Asbury Park station. He told Caleb that he would need to take a connection train at Long Branch, but he would have to wait since there wasn't one running at that time. So Caleb asked to use Robert Scully's phone, which he did, and Caleb made multiple calls to his ride, asking his ride to meet him in Long Branch instead. And that train arrived in Long Branch around 2:30 in the morning. The next day, on Monday, May 13th, Caleb left another voicemail for Kim to tell her that he had to cut his hair so she wouldn't be looking for his signature long hair. Caleb and Kim eventually met up, at which point he told Kim that he had been raped, that he had contacted police but they wouldn't help him because his alleged assailant was an attorney. Caleb described to Kim how he had awakened to find his attacker had ejaculated in his mouth and on his face, but his attacker denied any wrongdoing, so he just left his house. Kim noted that she did not see any types of injuries on Caleb, no cuts, scratches, bruises, or scrapes on his hands, arms, or face, and Caleb told her that he had cut his hair with a knife, but did not tell her why he did it. On the way to Philadelphia, Kim also picked up another friend. Kim said that Caleb was very friendly and talkative. He was talking to other people. He interacted with some kids. He did some rapping and some beatboxing and joking around, and was generally extremely animated and playful, chatty, offbeat, and quirky, just like the Caleb that the world got to know and love. But she said that he was weird. After they spent some time in Philly, Kim drove Caleb to the city of Glassboro, New Jersey, which is in the eastern region of the state, about a half hour south of Philadelphia. Kim had a friend there named Marjorie Wagner, who agreed to let Caleb crash there for the night. According to Marjorie, she, Caleb, and her boyfriend spent the evening of Monday, May 13th, talking and drinking beers. The next evening, which is Tuesday the 14th, she and her boyfriend drove Caleb to the train station in Haddonfield and dropped him off sometime between 7 and 8 p.m. And while both of these individuals described Caleb as interesting and weird, he never did mention to them anything about being raped. Caleb's whereabouts were unknown until he was recognized at that Starbucks and subsequently picked up at that Greyhound station in Philadelphia. Caleb's murder trial, however, did not begin until April of 2019, almost 6 years after he was arrested. The questions lingering around this whole situation with Mr. Joseph Galfy is why? Why did Caleb beat the ever-living shit out of the 74-year-old man? Because his injuries were extensive, and it is believed that Caleb didn't just punch the guy. They believe that he stomped on his face and head and body. A portion of the autopsy findings showed that Mr. Galfy had blunt force trauma to the head with contusions on the forehead and the face. Both of his orbital plates were fractured. He had contusions of the strap muscles of the neck, which is an indication of strangulation. He had a fractured cervical vertebrae, which is basically a broken neck. He had rib fractures, and he had bruises, injuries, and contusions to his face. He had black eyes, a busted lip. One of his ears was almost ripped off, and injuries all over his upper torso and upper extremities. So when it comes to why, there seems to be a theory about Caleb possibly being one of those types of individuals who supports vigilante justice when it comes to dealing with sexual predators. The reason this idea came about had to do with at least one of Caleb's past social media posts. Just a couple of weeks prior to Mr. Galfy's murder, Caleb linked an article titled, "Is Vigilante Pedophile Hunting a Good Idea?" And he commented, "You decide for you, I'll decide for me. Preach to the choir, and the choir boys read between the lines." When Caleb was taken into custody for Mr. Galfy's murder, among the items that Caleb had with him were pages that he had printed out that contained the information of registered sex offenders. So it had authorities wondering if Caleb felt as if the way that he met Joseph in Times Square, if perhaps how they started talking, maybe Caleb felt like he had approached him in a predatory way. Caleb has reported at least one time in the past where he was sexually assaulted and his attacker was never convicted. We have that disturbing statement that Caleb made when he was speaking to that band in Fresno, where he was talking about living your best life, being happy, unless someone F's you up the ass. So it seems as if Caleb would have reasons to feel justified in taking justice into his own hands if that is the reason behind the killing. But in typical cop fashion, they have to point out that Caleb continued to interact amicably with Mr. Joseph Galfy even after he had allegedly been assaulted. Caleb claimed that he had been attacked the first night that they were together, which would have been Saturday, May 11th. The next day, Mr. Galfy purchased Caleb a train ticket so he could get down to Asbury Park to meet up with his online friend Kim. When those plans fell through, Caleb reconnected with Mr. Galfy, as he essentially had no place else to crash that night, which would have been Sunday the 12th. That's when Caleb claimed that he was drugged only to wake up to find Mr. Galfy attempting to pull his pants down, and that's when he began beating him to death, allegedly. Investigators point out that this appeared to be a very one-sided fight, that Caleb had no injuries or defensive wounds. But I mean, the guy was 50 years older than Caleb. I don't know exactly what happened between the two men that night. All we can go by is the evidence and what Caleb has said. And he's maintained from the start that this was a sexual assault and he acted in self-defense. If Caleb was drugged, then we can assume that Mr. Galfy expected Caleb to be rendered unable to defend himself. So when he came to and immediately realized what was going on, Caleb could have just hauled off and thrown one really massive punch to Mr. Galfy's face, and that could have rendered him unable to defend himself. After all, he's much older than Caleb. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but it could explain why Caleb didn't have any injuries. And it's not unheard of for sexual assault survivors or survivors of intimate partner violence to continue to interact with their attacker after the fact. But if you want the simple answer, and if you believe Caleb's story, then he killed Mr. Galfy in an act of self-defense. And that would be the reason why all of this happened. Do I necessarily believe that myself? Not really. I just think that there is so much more going on inside Caleb's mind, possibly stuff that he doesn't even understand himself. Caleb just seems so messed up because of the trauma and the substance abuse. And I mean, it's really hard to try and put myself in Caleb's place and the situation that he found himself in when he was invited into this man's house. But a potential scenario that came to my mind is like, okay, so Caleb encounters this older man. Remember, he's 50 years older than Caleb. And I mean, these are ostensibly two consenting adults with free will, right? Mr. Galfy strikes up this conversation with Caleb. And it's probably pretty clear what Mr. Galfy's intentions were. The gray area may have been, and even for Mr. Galfy and for Caleb, would be what Caleb's intentions were, or what his agenda was. We know this isn't the first older guy that Caleb's linked up with to bum a ride off of or whatever. That's how he ended up on the internet in the first place, hitchhiking with good old Jett McBride. Caleb probably wanted a ride, alcohol, drugs, food, and a place to stay for the night. And Mr. Galfy had all of that to offer, but there may have been this expectation for there to be some sexual interaction between the two of them, and whatever it was that happened, something in Caleb just snapped. He's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and PTSD. The latter likely related to childhood trauma or having been previously sexually assaulted. And with that, things just went really bad from there. The beating that Caleb inflicted on Mr. Galfy, it sounded like it was very frenzied, and the guy never saw it coming, and it was very, very violent. According to Caleb's testimony at his trial, and he took the stand as one does when the contention is that this was an act of self-defense, and he testified that when his plans with Kim, the New Jersey friend that he met on social media, fell through after the first night that he spent with Mr. Galfy, Caleb contacted him and asked him if he could pick him up so he could stay at his place again. Mr. Galfy agreed, but said that it would have to wait for a while because at the time that Caleb called him, he was in New York City. Caleb was picked up about 45 minutes later. Once they got back to Mr. Galfy's house, according to Caleb, he poured him a beer. They had dinner and a few more beers, and that's when Caleb described feeling really warm and fuzzy and like relaxed. He said that he remembered Mr. Galfy putting dishes into the dishwasher, and the last thing he remembered was hearing the theme song to Jeopardy! By the time Caleb came through, he said he was laying on his back in Mr. Galfy's bedroom, and he stated, "The next thing I knew, he was shoving me into the bed, and I was trying to get away from him, and I was hitting him, and then he shoved my head onto the floor, and then he body slammed me and I couldn't breathe, and I was trying to get out from underneath him, and he kept humping and grinding me, and he was trying to put his dick in my mouth, and I was trying to get him away from me. That's all I can remember." In his testimony, Caleb couldn't remember how he left Mr. Galfy's home or where he went from there. He testified that he came to in a parking lot, that his muscles were sore, and he had a headache and a metallic taste in his mouth. He said that he did remember going to the 7-Eleven. At the diner he went to the restroom, he dry heaved into a toilet and splashed some water onto his face. He showed that viral video of himself to those men that he was talking to at that diner. He ate dinner and then he went outside to smoke a cigarette. He testified that he was having problems with his cell phone, and when he finally got on the train, he said his phone smelled like urine and it wouldn't turn on, so he threw it out. He said that he didn't know where the clothing that he had on during the time that he was sexually assaulted by Mr. Galfy was at, but that they were soaked in blood and urine. Caleb had on different clothing when he was arrested in Philadelphia, and he acknowledged on the stand that he had to have changed his clothing at some point because when he came to, he was wearing different clothes. And then Caleb testified that he had no idea that Mr. Galfy was dead until he was told by the detectives in Philadelphia. When he was questioned about cutting his hair, he said he did it on the 12th, which would have been the same day that Mr. Galfy was murdered, and he said he did it because he was hot. It was nearly 6 years from the time Mr. Galfy was killed to the time Caleb actually went on trial. But in the beginning, when Caleb was first arrested, only 3 months after he rose to internet fame with his Smash, suh-maaaashed video, he had a really strong online following of supporters, with even a defense fund that had been created for him. And they also wanted to try and raise the bail money that he was being held on. But it doesn't sound like it went all that well for Caleb because he ended up sitting in jail for those 6 years awaiting trial. In the end, Caleb was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 57 years in prison. And when he was sentenced, the judge said, among other things, that when he gets out of prison, he will still be younger than Mr. Galfy was when he died. Caleb has appealed his conviction, but so far it's been upheld. Towards the end of the documentary, there's a bit of blaming and finger-pointing going on. Friends of Mr. Galfy blame the media vultures that created Kai, that they overlooked the fact that the only reason Kai went viral was because of a very violent act, and they took that and they ran with it. The media people defended what they did in that at the end of the day, they liked Kai. They'd met a different side of him, and all they wanted was for him to find success and happiness. And that may have been true to an extent, and when those media people finally decided to stop ignoring all those red flags, they rolled back on their TV offers and all of the deals, and they just let Caleb go. And they kind of forgot about him, because the truth was, there was really only so much they could do for the guy. Caleb was the one who rode the wave of internet fame, and he surfed it all the way to New Jersey, and he eventually found himself in this entanglement of sorts with Mr. Joseph Galfy. There are a couple of things that I think have been overlooked by the justice system and the court system when it came to their dealings with Caleb in this situation. And it all goes back to our system here in the United States being punishment-centered. And that's that they didn't take into consideration the impact of childhood trauma, mental illness, and substance abuse, and what that meant for Caleb. He was only 24 years old at the time that this murder happened. And to me, it seems like Caleb's brain had never really fully developed while the rest of him made it to adulthood. And when it came to the first-degree murder charge, I mean, there are so many cases out there with similar situations where there is violence between intimate partners that escalates to one person ending up dead. And many of those defendants end up convicted of lesser included charges, such as second-degree murder, manslaughter, or whatever. I don't know if there was ever a plea offer. It doesn't sound like there was, because Caleb's story, even before he was arrested, was this was self-defense. Obviously, the jury rejected that and found him guilty of first-degree murder. And there is that true crimey side of me that feels like they kind of got it right, this guy was clearly dangerous from the get-go. And he had moments where he was thoughtful and lucid. He was talented and he had hustle. He was far from a helpless, hopeless, hapless, homeless hitchhiker. He was the hitchhiker with a hatchet, and he made no secret of that. But then when I circle back to motive, if we don't buy Caleb's self-defense story, then why? The place wasn't ransacked. I don't know if there was anything of significance taken. I didn't get the impression that Caleb was necessarily interested in lining his pockets. No matter what he was doing or where he was going, people were willing to throw money and material things at Caleb all day long, but he seemed to be the type of person who would rather walk into a bar and try to bum a free drink off of someone instead of standing outside panhandling for money and then taking that money and going into a bar and buying a drink himself. The point being, if self-defense wasn't the reason and robbery or burglary wasn't the motive, Caleb either snapped, or he had some kind of episode, or he just flew into a blind rage as a result of his mental health issues, or his PTSD, or he is just a violent guy with violent tendencies who beat Mr. Galfy to death because that's exactly what he intended to do for whatever reason Caleb felt like he had to do it. And when it comes to whether or not this had anything to do with Caleb possibly having this perception of Mr. Galfy as being a sexual predator, then maybe the jury did get it right, because nobody has the right to kill somebody in an act of vigilante justice. Also, towards the end of the documentary, Caleb's mother made a final appearance. She said that she offered to go visit him in prison. No surprise, he said no thanks. I mean, that's rich coming from her, right? This woman locked Caleb up in a room until she turned him over to the group home where she would never have to take care of him anymore, now wanting to come visit him where he's locked up in a room where she's never going to have to take care of him again. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And that brings this 251st episode of California Dreaming to a close. I'm walking out of this episode not really sure how I feel about Caleb McGillivary. This is one of those where it feels like everybody was wrong, and it's just Caleb was the most wrong. In the beginning, I wasn't really big on Caleb and his old song and dance. I thought it was all a bunch of BS-y hype. But then once I started really reading into the things that those media people were trying to get him to do and all the things that Caleb's mom was saying, my feelings started to turn a bit more empathetic. But then I read Mr. Galfy's autopsy report, and I just have a hard time seeing any kind of justification for a beatdown like that, especially on an elderly. I'm curious as to how all of you feel about this story. What are your takeaways? What did I miss the mark on? I feel like this can go in so many directions, and I don't know if there's anything that is really black and white in this story, with the exception of this one takeaway. If the words hatchet wielding is involved, consider that to be a red flag. No matter the situation, it's probably not going to end well. And that's all I've got. Hit me up on social media, and until next time, sweet dreams.
All you'd have to do if you want to, pull back my hood and kiss me real good, and just move, get a little bit closer and pull back you do.